Good afternoon, Scott Baker.
Is it, Mikey? Is it really? Um, I mean, you wrecked my opening because originally, and let's talk about it behind her back. Mallory, one of our managing directors, was going to be on with us, and we're not going to get into why she's not. Terrible reason. Actually, it's not. But I was gonna. My whole premise was going to be because she has young kids. You and I have older kids.
Right.
And because today's field note is why setting boundaries for assignments signals trust, not control, right? My question, the way that I was going to get all of our attention and get us really invested in this was I was going to kind of use the idea of the kids, the playpen or the little play yard, thing where you just imprison the child, right?
Right.
And I wanted to get her feedback around that because I didn't. Maybe things have changed since, we had toddlers and whatnot. And I was counting on Mallory's insight. So we're just going to have to intuit it. You see where I'm going with this? To say, we all know that the idea was if you let the kid be like total freedom to wander the neighborhood, we'll get back to the idea of the free range kid, that then disaster could happen. Like we saw a couple of toddlers crossing a highway in Florida the other day, and fortunately a guy came and swept them up. That doesn't work. So we always say, you put the kid in the playpen, and then they're totally happy. They can actually they're going to be so creative because they know where the boundaries are. Now you see the brilliance of how I was going to set this up, and now it's all falling apart.
Now it's ruined. I've got an alternative for you. How about I engage everybody, including you, with a puzzle of some sort?
Okay.
All right. So the puzzle is specifically around the idea of three people are in a car and they're going from Miami to New York. What is the fastest way for them to get there?
Get out of the car and go to the airport?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Oh,
right?
That's okay. Sorry, I got
so
or drive to the airport. Yeah, right.
So you demonstrated outside of the box thinking because I actually tried to put you inside a box.
You did. I'm sorry if I wrecked the premise.
No. It's fine that somebody like if you're in a crowd of people and you say that puzzle, it's natural for you to get a lot of people to discuss how the three drivers can take 8-hour shifts, right? And that type of thing. And then they'll talk about the efficiency of inside the box thinking, right?
Right.
And then you would have somebody like yourself who say, well, if the question is about the fastest, then you are naturally demonstrating outside of boundaries thinking. Now, it could be a frustrating thing for me, even in the way I could be meta and be like, oh, you weren't supposed to do that. You were supposed to pretend like you couldn't think outside the box for the sake of the conversation and stay inside of the box for the answers. But I didn't set the boundary up in such a way that forced you to be in there. I set up the boundary in a word play kind of way. Okay, so I use that illustration to say that oftentimes bosses, leaders, we try to get creativity and a problem solving kind of thing by hoping that people will think outside the box. But we don't actually want people to operate outside the box. Not really. We actually don't. Because if you send me an idea and I say, no, Scott, it doesn't work for this reason, and this reason. But then you're like, yeah, but Mikey really wants us to be outside the box. So I'm going to do it anyway. Because what more outside of the box thinking is there than me saying no to my leader without him realizing it and doing it anyway? Like I'll be rewarded for outside the box. Like you call it insubordination, but I just call it outside the box thinking, right? And which is truly outside the box thinking, right? But we don't want that as leaders, right? And so it is interesting the way that we set up our parameters. We set up our parameters around creativity. So this idea that we are setting up boundaries and walls that we don't want people to go outside of, even though inside of those walls, we want people to be outside the box all the time. We are constantly setting up not real boundaries and real boundaries just by the very language that we use. And we think, well, let's not over explain it. So we don't explain it over and over again. So people have a tendency to just work on the inside the box kind of thing. So there's this constant repetition of frustration around what is inside the box, what
Sure.
is outside the box. Why aren't you working outside the box? I asked you to think outside the box, but you haven't done that, right? And unfortunately, a lot of that is trapped in a language game. Sometimes that language game translates into like an attitude game. But unless a leader is thinking about these things all the time, they will kind of trap their team into one way of working.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and some of it has to do with definition, and that's one of the cool things in the field note is that it talks about the fact that when you could say, well, we have boundaries, we know where the parameters are, we know where the guardrails are, and people will be like, do we? Because kind of that happens over here and this happens over here. And what the field note is saying is that in the ambiguity and fuzziness of all of that, what happens? Actually, that's when micromanagement seems to thrive. The leader's like, yes, well, we can do anything and let's just work, on this kind of in this thing. And then they don't really define it. And people are starting to work and they go, well, that's not what I meant. This was not that. And then they go, well, what shouldn't we be working on this? And so the idea here is to say to leaders, give your team, your people a gift by just kind of coming in and saying, look, I trust you because that's what we're talking about here. It's not control. And when I say, here's the budget or here's the deadlines, however you get there, as long as the clients are happy, as long as nobody's going to jail, we're all good, right?
Right.
If I say, and then I actually have to live by that. If I say the only criteria are budget, no jail, happy clients, am I good with those three, right?
Right.
And be like, do I really mind? Maybe some of them can go to jail. No, I don't want any of them to go to jail. All right.
Right.
Well, at least we know where we're at. And then when that happens, the team's like, cool.
Yes.
Go away. We're good now. We don't need to hear from you.
Right. So it was funny that I just read yesterday in the book by Morgan Housel, The Psychology of Money. So he mentioned this anecdote about Cornelius Vanderbilt in the 1920s, who was confronted by someone who worked for him that said, all of the plans that you have for railroad expansion in New York is illegal. And Vanderbilt responded to him, are you under the impression that it's even possible to operate in a legal way inside of the New York train law? And so like he was apparently famous for just like avoiding any kind of legal boundaries in the way that he thought and operated. And then as his riches continued to expand and he continued that he's just famous for that, just skirting the law all the time. So anybody who's starting and doesn't have
now,
the
by
resources
the way,
of Vanderbilt.
I don't know what Housel gets into, but maybe he was right. Maybe there was no possible way for anybody, even not Cornelius Vanderbilt, to actually be in compliance with so many regulations or confusion that nobody knew what was going on.
Yeah, the point that he was making was that different people assess risk in a different way. Right. And so Vanderbilt just had the ability to operate in a way where the risk of going to jail was not something that he even was concerned about. Right. And he would say what you exactly said is like, if I don't have the ability to operate otherwise, like, why is staying legal a value that I should hold to? Now, it sounds as if the two of us and Morgan Housel are like actually making the case for breaking the law. Like things were different in the 1920s in such a way where we may have been looking at Vanderbilt and said, yeah, he's okay to operate that way, but we're not necessarily saying that. So, and if one of your values internally is like, let's stay legal the entire time, then those are clear boundaries that we operate within. Some organizations do operate that way and other organizations do not operate that way. And so it's not a light thing to just kind of dismiss as to whether or not you want your employees or your team to stay legal. And whether or not you've hired legal counsel in order to kind of debate that for you is up to you. Some people spend money that way. Other people just steer clear of the bright red line that is legal or illegal. But it's kind of funny the way that, it's hard not to have this conversation without quickly getting to values. Quickly.
Well, and I actually think that that's the part that's sort of not fully explored in this field note, because what can you do in a couple of hundred words? But it's not just values. It's actually why the theme of this field note is echoed in some of the most profound literature that humanity has ever produced, right? We talk a great deal over, philosophers and theologians and teachers and sages have always talked about this idea that when you have this concept of just sort of unlimited freedom, people are not free. And we don't tend to even seek that ourselves. And when you see people that are unmoored by either tradition or training or discipline or the craftsmanship of a particular area of mastery, that's where virtuosity generally comes. Once you have really mastered what what's the famous Catmull quote from Creativity, that craft is what you're expected to know, and art is the unexpected use of your craft, right? So it's saying, okay, we've got some things. This is what we do, and here's how we do it. Now go be creative. Now, once you get that, and that level, by the way, of the true virtuoso is when they've reached that mastery. They've taken it to another level. And then they say, let's bring in a little more chaos to see what happens, to see how now we respond when we're at the upper level of our performance. Well, let your team go in that direction. But I think it's also a good caution to a team to say, this field note is not a just go be a rebel. It's not permission to do that. There's a reason that you honor not only the boundaries, but you're honoring the tradition of what's been built and why. I mean, it's kind of, was it the G.K. Chesterton fence? The idea that when you come across the stone fence in the field, before you knock it down, find out why it was there. It's probably there for a reason, and maybe it needed to be there. And sometimes when we have the old stone fences that are there, they allow us to actually have a greater sense of freedom within those and a greater sense of productivity, and we can reach new heights.
Right. So what's the behavioral part here? On a daily, monthly cadence, yearly cadence, you're asking people to reevaluate what is the box, what is inside the box, and what is outside the box.
I don't know. To me, what hit me on this was, it's not just. There's an easy part of this that's saying to a leader, trust your teams. Let them have creativity time. That's missing the first part of this, which is be really clear about what the boundaries are. And a lot of leaders don't even want to get there because they haven't really even thought about that. It requires a little bit of work on your part to say, here are the parameters, and define them. And then you actually have to have the discipline to stay out of it after that, if that's the outline of the game plan. So I think that's actually trickier for most leaders because they just have never done it.
I agree. And it brings to mind what we talked about with John yesterday. It's like, what are the things that trigger whether or not, your team is needing to be challenged in this way. And what he mentioned specifically was around the idea of if it feels like they're doing the same things in the same ways, and they are personally not challenging their thinking, then that's probably your clue for the idea that you need to at least provide room for them to shake things up. And as we mentioned yesterday, shaking things up isn't productivity, it's time to think, right? And so if you're giving them time to think about new and innovative ways to be able to do things, then it goes hand in hand. Like I didn't think of yesterday's field note and today's field note as complementary, but they very much are. If you haven't read yesterday's, go back and read yesterday's.
Yeah, and what I'm really hoping is for our discussion tomorrow is that we find out that the real reason why Mallory wasn't able to join us today is one of her kids just got loose from the playpen and she's chasing them all around the neighborhood, right? That would be fantastic, because then we'd have a lot to really cover in terms of like, will you see what happens?
Right. All right. Final quote: good leaders don't put boundaries in place to sustain the mission. They set them to concentrate it. And I like it, right?
Yes.
I like the idea. Oftentimes we don't think of setting boundaries for that reason. We're like, want to make sure that people don't get out of this thing. But boundaries are really about concentrated mission.
Yeah, and concentrate's a great word there. It's not only like just like, can you concentrate? It's like that idea of like, we're bringing it into focus. Like we're really getting clarity on what needs to be done. Right.
Excellent. Okay, cool. Thanks for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mikey. See you tomorrow.
All right. Bye now.